I was never supposed to be anyone important, just a mother, a quiet woman who gave everything to raise a son on her own. I sold my jewelry to buy him a bike, skipped meals so he could eat better, and turned down a second marriage so he wouldn't feel abandoned. I thought love was enough. But 3 days after his wedding, where his new bride called me a burden in front of 200 guests, I signed a document that changed everything. They thought I was poor, fragile, easy to erase. What they didn't know? I had quietly built an empire worth over $3 billion. And now, I wasn't just a forgotten mother, I was their reckoning. This isn't a story of revenge, it's about silence, power, and the quiet fury of a woman they should never have underestimated. My name is Martha Ellison, and I am 68 years old. People often see me now, quiet, composed, polite, and assume I've lived a gentle life. They don't see the storm I've weathered. They don't see the weight I've carried on my back for over 3 decades, or the sacrifices I made for a single boy who once held my whole heart in his tiny hands. I was 35 when my husband Gregory died. He was my college sweetheart, the love of my life, and a brilliant civil engineer who died suddenly in a car crash on a rainy Thursday. I remember that day vividly, how I held Ethan, who was only 5, and told him Daddy had gone to heaven, even though my own heart had shattered into pieces. I didn't cry in front of him. I smiled, made him hot cocoa, and tucked him into bed like it was any ordinary night. That's what mothers do. Back then, I was a rising star on Wall Street, an investment strategist known in a small but fierce circle. I'd just gotten my name onto a column in a national finance journal. Offers were pouring in. There were whispers of me becoming the youngest female managing partner at my firm. But then, Gregory died, and suddenly none of it mattered. Everyone told me to hire a nanny. Don't throw away your future, they said. But Ethan was my future. I walked into my boss's office, handed in my resignation, and never looked back. I sold our Manhattan apartment and moved to a modest house in the suburbs of Ohio. No one there knew who I had been. That was the plan. I wanted to start over, not as the widow of a finance mogul, but as a mother with one job: raise a boy who would grow up strong, kind, and safe. The first few years were brutal. There were nights when I fed Ethan and pretended I wasn't hungry just so I could stretch our grocery budget. I gave up my tailored suits and professional wardrobe, replacing them with secondhand sweaters and sturdy jeans. My hands, once manicured for corporate meetings, became calloused from yard work and patching up Ethan's torn jeans. I learned how to fix plumbing, file taxes, and soothe nightmares, often all in the same day. Still, I never felt like I was losing anything. Every smile from Ethan, every "I love you, Mom," was worth more than any 6-figure bonus. I watched him grow from a sensitive boy into a confident teenager. He was my pride, my purpose, my reason for waking up each morning. When he was accepted into medical school, I cried. Not because it was a prestigious school, but because I had done it. I had raised a boy into a man. To make it happen, I cashed out the last of our savings. I even sold the antique piano my father had left me. Ethan never knew. I never wanted him to feel guilty. I wanted him to walk into that lecture hall with his head held high, not worrying about tuition or textbooks. I worked nights doing freelance bookkeeping, took care of neighbors' lawns on weekends, anything to keep the lights on. What no one knew, not even Ethan, was that I never entirely left the world of finance. I kept a small portion of our funds invested, quietly, carefully. I read markets late at night, made strategic trades under a pseudonym, and built something invisible. I wasn't just surviving, I was still growing, planting seeds for a future I didn't know I'd need. But I never flaunted it. I never told Ethan about the money. In my mind, it wasn't about wealth, it was about stability. If something ever happened to me, I wanted him to have something more than memories and funeral bills. And besides, what mother expects repayment from her child? All I wanted was to matter, to be remembered, not with fanfare or monuments, but with simple gratitude. A phone call on Sundays, a chair saved for me at Thanksgiving, a sense that the life I gave him had meant something. Looking back, I realize how fragile that dream was. I believed that love, given purely and endlessly, would circle back, that a mother's heart would always find home in her child's. I never imagined that one day my name would be erased from family events, that my place at the table would be filled by someone who saw me as nothing more than an inconvenience. But in those early years, I held hope like a lantern in the dark. I loved Ethan so deeply, so completely, that I thought it would be enough to protect us both. It wasn't. Ethan grew up to be everything I had hoped for: bright, ambitious, compassionate, or at least that's what I believed for a long time. He finished medical school with honors, specializing in orthopedic surgery. I remember the day he received his white coat. I sat in the very last row of the auditorium, my eyes full of tears, my hands trembling from pride. When they called his name, I clapped so hard my palms stung. I thought to myself, this is it. Everything was worth it. After graduation, Ethan moved to another city for residency, and though our phone calls became less frequent, I didn't worry. He was busy, I told myself. Doctors worked long hours. He was building his future. I stayed in our old house in Ohio, keeping it neat, warm, and ready, just in case he ever wanted to come home for the weekend. It was during his second year of residency that he met Lily. At first, I was thrilled. He spoke of her often, how smart she was, how driven. She was studying law and came from a well-connected family, as he put it. I was happy he'd found someone who challenged him. But slowly, something changed. His tone shifted. He started avoiding certain topics, brushing off my questions. When I asked if I could meet Lily, he said, "Not yet, Mom. She's private." Still, I didn't push. I trusted him. A few months later, he called to say he was buying a house. I was ecstatic. He mentioned it casually, like it was just another step in his adult life. "It's in a good neighborhood," he said. 3 bedrooms, perfect for the future. He sounded happy. That was enough for me. What he didn't say was that he needed help with the down payment. It wasn't until 2 days later that I received an email, a formal-looking PDF with financial projections, a proposed mortgage, and a short message. "Mom, I hate to ask, but could you help out with the initial payment? Just a loan. I'll pay you back." I didn't hesitate. I wired the money the same afternoon. It was a significant sum, enough to cover 40% of the property, but I didn't think twice. It wasn't a loan, it was a gift. Mothers don't keep score. Later, when he opened his private practice, the story repeated itself. New equipment, interior design, website development. I funded it all. Quietly, without fanfare. Every time he thanked me, I waved it off. "Just focus on being the best doctor you can be," I told him. "Let me worry about the rest." By the time Ethan and Lily were officially engaged, I had contributed over $300,000 to his new life. But I didn't care. I wasn't counting. I was investing in my son's happiness, in his future. That's what I told myself. Then came the twist, the moment I didn't expect. I was visiting Ethan one weekend, bringing some homemade soup and fresh linens. He was at work, but Lily was home. It was the first time we were alone together. She was polite, but cold, like someone performing kindness out of obligation. She thanked me for the soup, placed it in the fridge without looking at it, and returned to her phone. I tried to make conversation, asked about wedding plans, but she kept it vague. Then, as I wandered through the house, their house, I noticed something odd. On the mantel, next to their framed engagement photo, was a stack of official-looking documents. I wasn't snooping, but one page caught my eye, the deed to the house. It listed Ethan as the sole owner. No mention of me, not even in the financing paperwork. My name was nowhere. That night, when Ethan came home, I asked him gently, "Why didn't you include me on the deed, honey? Just for legal clarity?" He hesitated, then smiled weakly. "It's just easier for taxes this way, Mom. You understand." I nodded, but something inside me shifted. Later, I tried to brush it off. I didn't want to be the kind of mother who demanded recognition, but the unease lingered. especially when I realized my name wasn't on anything, not the clinic registration, not the website, not even the wedding invitation drafts. I was always Mom, never contributor, never partner, never visible. Weeks passed, and I tried to convince myself it didn't matter. I had helped because I loved him. I had never asked for credit. But one evening, I overheard a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. Ethan had accidentally dialed me during a car ride. I picked up, thinking he was calling, but all I heard was him talking to Lily. My name came up. "She's just sensitive," Ethan said. "If we include her too much, she might start thinking she's part of everything." Lily laughed. "I just don't want her hanging around all the time. We have our own life now." Then Ethan added, "Don't worry, she doesn't need to know the details. She's happy just being around." I sat there in the dark, holding the phone to my ear long after the call ended. My hands shook. My stomach turned. And in that moment, something broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. The wedding invitation arrived not in an envelope with a loving note, but in an impersonal email. Formal attire, ceremony at 4, reception to follow. That was it. No, we hope you can make it. No warmth, no family touch. It felt like receiving an online bill. Still, I smiled as I read it. I told myself Ethan was just busy. Weddings were stressful. Maybe Lily had handled the details. I picked out a soft blue dress, simple and elegant, something I thought would make me look dignified, but not imposing. I even booked a professional blow dry, something I hadn't done in years. 2 days before the ceremony, I received a phone call from Lily's sister, who was apparently handling the wedding logistics. She was polite, but firm. "Hi, Martha. I just wanted to confirm your seat placement and attire. Lily has requested that all guests from the groom's family wear neutral colors. Nothing flashy or overly formal. Also, we're keeping the speeches minimal, so please don't prepare any remarks. Oh, and regarding gifts, Ethan mentioned you've already been generous, so no need to bring anything." The words felt rehearsed, like I was a last-minute detail to manage, not the mother of the groom. "Of course," I replied, my voice even. But inside, something stung. The day of the wedding was bright, beautiful, almost painfully so. The venue was a grand estate outside the city, all white roses and crystal chandeliers. Guests mingled in designer suits and gowns. I arrived early, eager to catch a moment with Ethan, but was told he was with the photographer. No one guided me. I wandered around until I found my seat. Table 18, far from the stage, tucked behind a column near the kitchen entrance. I sat alone for a while, sipping water, pretending not to notice the way people glanced at me with vague curiosity. I didn't know many of them. Most were from Lily's side. A few of Ethan's colleagues offered polite nods, but no one sat with me. Then came the ceremony. I craned my neck to see as Ethan walked down the aisle, tall and confident in a gray suit. He looked handsome. I felt a lump in my throat. This was my boy, my baby, and here he was stepping into a new chapter. Lily followed in a gown that shimmered like champagne. Her smile was wide, radiant, but when her eyes met mine, there was no kindness, just calculation. The ceremony was short. They exchanged vows, kissed, and walked back up the aisle to applause. I clapped, but my hands felt numb. At the reception, I tried to stay out of the way. I approached Ethan once to hug him. He accepted briefly, then turned away to greet someone else. I smiled through it. Dinner was served. Speeches began. Lily's father toasted the couple with a grand, emotional monologue. Her maid of honor shared a charming story. Then the MC stepped up. And now, one last word from someone very special. Lily would like to say a few words about her new family. Lily took the mic with grace, smiled at the crowd, and began. "I just want to thank everyone for being here today. It means so much to start this journey surrounded by people who truly support us. I've always believed that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who show up, who stand by you, who respect your boundaries." She paused, looked at me. "I'm grateful to Ethan's mother for attending today. Though we may come from different worlds, I hope she understands that in our family, we have a new way of doing things, a modern way. One where mothers respect that their sons are now men and wives come first. A few people shifted uncomfortably. A man chuckled nervously. I sat frozen. Then she added, sweet as syrup. I know some mothers struggle with letting go, but I believe in growth, in evolution. And today, I'm proud to say we're building a home where the past stays in the past. The room was silent. I felt my face flush. My throat tightened. And as I reached for my glass of water, I realized my hand was trembling. I looked at Ethan. He was holding Lily's hand, watching her. He didn't flinch, didn't frown, didn't object. He saw the humiliation. He knew exactly what she meant, and he said nothing. I stood up slowly. My chair scraped against the floor. A few guests turned. I smiled so they wouldn't see my tears and walked calmly out of the ballroom. I didn't make a scene. I didn't throw my drink. I didn't speak a single word. Outside, the air was cool. The sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the driveway. I waited for a cab on the curb, shivering not from cold but from something deeper. A quiet, hollow ache spreading through my chest. When the car arrived, I climbed in, closed the door, and stared ahead. I didn't cry. Not yet. I hadn't planned to stay for the reception dinner, but something in me needed closure. A foolish, lingering part of my heart hoped Ethan would pull me aside, apologize, tell me Lily's words had been out of line, that he still saw me, still loved me. I waited through cocktail hour, standing alone near the back patio while guests laughed and sipped champagne. I didn't belong there, and I knew it, but I stayed anyway. When it was time for dinner, a young woman with a clipboard approached me. "Hi, Mrs. Ellison, just confirming. Table 21, yes?" I frowned. I was told table 18. She blinked, then glanced at her list. "Oh, no, 21 for you, near the back wall." She smiled tightly and moved on before I could respond. I walked to table 21, tucked into a corner near the kitchen, swinging doors. It wasn't just far from the stage, it was practically in the service zone. Staff bustled past with trays, calling out orders. I could smell dishwater. My place card had my name written in generic cursive, not even my full name, just Martha. No title, no mother of the groom. I sat down, my hands in my lap. I tried to ignore the clatter of dishes, the faint aroma of bleach. One of the guests at the table was a teenager chewing gum, scrolling on his phone. Another was a distant cousin from Lily's side, who offered a polite nod and nothing more. This wasn't a place of honor. This wasn't even a place of acknowledgement. Then came the moment that twisted the knife. A server, older and slightly hunched, approached me with a tray of empty glasses. His face lit up when he saw me. "Ah, there you are. Took us a while to find someone to cover the dessert refill. You'll be handling table 9 and the cake display, right?" I stared at him, confused. He gestured at my simple gray dress. "Sorry, I didn't mean to rush you. Lily said she'd recruited a family member to help on short notice. I figured it was you. Why gained?" I opened my mouth but couldn't form a word. His face changed. "Oh, wait, you're not... Oh, no." He flushed, stammering. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean to offend." "It's fine," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. But it wasn't fine. It was devastating. I stood up, pushing my chair back slowly, carefully. I didn't make a scene. I didn't raise my voice or demand attention. I simply picked up my purse and walked toward the exit, weaving between tables as unnoticed as a shadow. No one followed. No one called my name. Outside, the parking lot shimmered under the setting sun. I took slow, steady steps toward the front gate, my heels clicking against the cobblestone path. I passed clusters of guests laughing over cigars and selfies, none of them looking my way. When I reached the main road, I raised my hand to hail a taxi, but before I could wave one down, I heard a sharp screech behind me. A delivery van turned too fast onto the narrow street and clipped the edge of the curb. The side mirror struck my shoulder hard enough to spin me around and knock me down. Pain shot through my hip as I hit the pavement. For a moment, the world blurred. I heard someone shout. The van braked hard, but before anyone could reach me, I forced myself upright. "I'm okay," I muttered, brushing dust from my skirt. My arm ached, my wrist throbbed, but I stood. The driver jumped out, panicked, apologizing over and over. I waved him off. "It's fine," I repeated. "Just get back in and go." He hesitated, then obeyed. I flagged down the next cab, climbed in without assistance, and gave my home address. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "You sure you're all right, ma'am?" "I'm fine," I said. But inside, I wasn't. My wrist was swelling, my back stung, and my chest felt like something had been scraped clean from the inside. The ride home was silent. No one called. No one noticed I had left. When I got home, I set my purse down gently on the kitchen table. I took off my shoes, one by one, then moved to the bathroom. I turned on the light and stared into the mirror. The woman who looked back at me didn't look like someone who had just come from her only son's wedding. Her hair was slightly askew. Her makeup had faded. Her eyes were red at the corners. She looked tired, older than 68. She looked invisible. I gripped the edge of the sink and took a deep breath. For decades, I had told myself that love, real, sacrificial, unwavering love, was enough. That if I gave everything without expectation, my son would remember. He would honor me. I had believed that being silent was noble. That being needed was the same as being valued. Now, for the first time, I let myself ask the question that had been scratching at the back of my mind. Had I been wrong? Had I confused sacrifice with self-erasure? Had I given so much that I disappeared? The thought chilled me. I stood there for a long time, listening to the hum of the bathroom light. Then I turned off the switch, stepped back into the dark hallway, and closed the door behind me. I didn't leave a note. No dramatic letter. No voicemail with trembling words. I simply vanished. Within a week of Ethan's wedding, I sold the house quietly through a third-party service that specialized in discreet listings. I told the neighbors I was moving closer to extended family, though there was none. I deactivated my social media, changed my number, and left no forwarding address. Everything Ethan and Lily could possibly use to find me, gone. I chose a small, quiet town in upstate New York, a place with more trees than traffic lights, where no one knew my name or my history. I rented a modest cottage near a lake, unpacked only what I needed, and donated the rest. My wedding dress, Ethan's childhood drawings, every letter he wrote from college. I burned them in the fireplace one chilly evening, watching the smoke curl like fingers letting go. It wasn't anger that drove me to disappear. It was clarity. For so long, I had existed entirely in relation to someone else. I was Gregory's wife, then Ethan's mother, then Lily's unwanted burden. I wanted just once to exist solely as me. And to my quiet disappointment, the silence that followed was absolute. Ethan didn't call. Lily didn't write. There was no search party, no worried voicemail asking if I was okay. Not a single knock on the door. Days turned into weeks, then months, and with each passing season, the grief shifted into something else. Acceptance, maybe, or apathy. It was hard to tell. But while I disappeared from their lives, I began reclaiming my own. Every morning, I walked to the lake with a thermos of tea. I read books I had never made time for. I planted tomatoes in ceramic pots by the window. My body ached less. My mind cleared. For the first time in years, I stopped waiting for the phone to ring. One Tuesday, I walked into a local bank to open a savings account. The clerk behind the counter was young, perhaps in her 20s, with a bright smile and an eager tone. I handed her the necessary documents, passport, tax ID, and a thick envelope with details for transferring funds from multiple brokerage accounts. She typed for a while, then paused. Mrs. Ellison? Yes? I think there might be a system error. Your account... It's showing multiple flags for high-volume trades and institutional-level holdings. Can I get a manager to assist? I nodded calmly. 10 minutes later, a man in a navy suit and thin glasses stepped out from the back. He introduced himself as Daniel, the branch investment manager. As he sat beside me, he glanced between my face and the screen, clearly puzzled. "Mrs. Ellison," he said slowly, "I hope this isn't intrusive, but are you the same Emmy Ellison who used to publish under the pseudonym Ellis Mark in the Financial Quarterly Investor's Edge back in the 90s? I blinked, caught off guard. "Yes," I admitted after a pause, "but I haven't used that name in decades." He leaned back slightly, impressed. "I thought so. Your risk index model for biopharma startups? It's still referenced in portfolio strategy courses. I used it in my thesis." I didn't know what to say. No one had recognized that name in over 20 years. Daniel continued, scrolling through the account details. "You're holding shares in at least 4 of the top-performing healthcare companies of the last decade. Quiet positions, staggered buy-ins, no single firm. It's brilliant. You've essentially diversified into a shadow portfolio most hedge funds would envy." I gave a faint smile. "Old habits die hard." He looked at me for a long moment, then said with genuine curiosity, "Why keep it all hidden?" I hesitated before answering. "Because people don't always understand quiet success, and sometimes they don't deserve to." He nodded respectfully. "If you ever want to formalize this into a trust or a private fund, we can help with that." "I'll think about it." After he walked me out, I sat in my car for several minutes staring at the bank receipt. The numbers were stark on the page. Clear, cold, undeniable. Net assets, $3.2 million in equities, another $700,000 in liquid cash. A pending merger could triple the valuation of one holding within a year. I was not poor. I was not powerless. I was not invisible. And suddenly, I realized something that sent a slow thrill through my veins. No one knew. Ethan and Lily thought they had erased me, boxed me away as an irrelevant figure in their new world, but they had no idea what I truly was. Not just a mother, not just a ghost from a life they'd outgrown. I was a woman who had survived loss, betrayal, and silence, and come out the other side holding the kind of leverage most people only dream of. I was no longer waiting to be seen. I had become someone who chose when and how to be seen. That night, after my meeting at the bank, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, a cup of chamomile tea slowly growing cold beside me. For the first time in decades, I wasn't reading financial news or stock tickers out of habit. I was planning something. I logged into every brokerage account, every investment portfolio, and started a full liquidation. Not all at once, of course. That would raise too many red flags. But over the course of 10 days, I began to unravel a financial structure I had built in silence over 30 years. By the end of it, I had liquidated nearly all my assets, equities, options, private holdings. I retained a small emergency cushion for myself and funneled the rest, over $4 million, into a newly formed trust. But not just any trust. This one bore a name no one would recognize, Arbor Grace Foundation. It was legally structured to function as a philanthropic entity with a contingency clause for personal succession, one that couldn't be contested or altered. I hired a boutique legal team out of Vermont to construct the layers. They were meticulous, discreet, and oddly impressed when I told them what I wanted. I want the beneficiary of this trust to meet a set of moral criteria, I told them. And I want an independent ethics board, no family, no bloodlines, evaluating those criteria annually. The lawyer blinked. "You mean like a code of conduct?" "Exactly. Not just financial responsibility, but compassion, integrity, selflessness." He smiled. "That's rare." I looked him in the eye. "So are second chances." The trust would grow, slowly but steadily. Most of the funds were redirected into low-risk social impact investments. Rural healthcare, food security, education grants. Every dollar I had once earned, chasing returns, was now working to repair the world that had wounded me. And Ethan? Ethan was no longer the automatic heir. By law, he had no access unless he was nominated by the ethics board based on documented acts of moral courage and community service. It was airtight. If he ever tried to sue, he'd find nothing, because technically I didn't own it anymore. Arbor Grace did, but the final twist, the one that felt like both justice and poetry, came by accident. While reviewing old files I'd backed up on a dusty hard drive, I stumbled upon a spreadsheet labeled Grant Recipients 2013. It was from the year I secretly started giving small scholarships to low-income students studying medicine. Just $500 here, $1,000 there. Anonymous donations, all routed through third parties. I had long forgotten their names, until I saw his, Dr. Alejandro Ruiz. I remembered him vaguely, a shy, soft-spoken boy with tired eyes and perfect grades. He had written me a thank you letter once, said the scholarship allowed him to buy his first anatomy textbook and stop working the night shift at a gas station, said he wanted to heal hands for a living. I Googled him. He was now a licensed orthopedic surgeon in a community hospital in New Mexico. He ran a free clinic on weekends. His social media was filled with patient success stories and fundraising links for kids with no insurance. He had never married, never moved to a big city, never taken a corporate job. He was, in every way, the man I had once hoped my son would become. I didn't hesitate. I contacted the legal team. I want Dr. Alejandro Ruiz listed as the secondary beneficiary of the trust, I said. If Ethan doesn't qualify by the board standards within the next 5 years, the trust passes fully to Dr. Ruiz. And does he know you? The attorney asked. I smiled faintly. Not anymore, but he'll remember the textbook. It was done by the end of the month. I sat back in my chair one evening looking out the window at the lake. Ducks skimmed across the water. The sky had turned a soft lavender, reflecting like silk on the surface. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Not loud, vengeful power. Not the kind that shouts in courtrooms or makes headlines. No. This was quiet, deliberate, earned power. The kind that doesn't need permission. The kind that builds legacies in silence and writes justice into the future with a steady hand. I had no intention of making Ethan suffer. That wasn't the point. I wasn't out for revenge. I simply wanted the universe to reflect back what I had always believed, that character matters. That love without respect is just decoration, and that sometimes the people we discard become the architects of our reckoning. I was no longer the woman crying in the back of a wedding hall. I was the founder of Arbor Grace, and I was just getting started. The cottage by the lake had begun to feel like home, but I knew I needed something more than silence. Solitude heals, yes, but purpose revives. It started as a passing thought. On my walks through the small town nearby, I noticed an old storefront with a crooked "For Lease" sign in the window. It had once been a flower shop, judging by the faint smell of dried lavender that still lingered near the doorframe. The windows were dusty, the floorboards creaky, but something about it felt open, like it had been waiting for me. So I signed the lease, not to make money. I had enough now to never work again, but I wanted to create something, a space that felt like warmth, a place where people could walk in cold and leave comforted. I decided to open a bakery. I named it Second Rise, a play on bread, of course, but also on life. I hadn't baked professionally before, but I'd always made banana bread for Ethan's lunchbox and cinnamon rolls for church potlucks. Baking, to me, was therapy. Precision and patience. Transformation through heat. The town was skeptical at first. A new business run by a quiet older woman no one really knew. But word spread quickly. I focused on simple things done well. Sourdough loaves with golden crusts, lemon bars with a touch of sea salt, apple pies spiced like autumn itself. I offered free coffee to anyone who brought a book, and discounts to nurses, teachers, and garbage collectors. Within 3 months, Second Rise became a local favorite. What surprised me most wasn't the popularity, it was the connection. People lingered. They told me about their bad days, their lost dogs, their teenage children who no longer spoke to them. I listened. I remembered names and birthdays. I kept a jar on the counter labeled "Need a Hug, Take One," filled with tiny paper scrolls of handwritten quotes. No one knew where I got them from. No one knew I stayed up late each Sunday night writing a dozen more. And then came the twist. I needed help keeping up with orders, so I put out a sign, "Help Wanted, Early Morning Baker's Assistant. No experience needed. Must love flour." She walked in 2 days later, a bright-eyed college student with dark curls pulled into a ponytail and a nervous smile. Her name was Elsie. "I'm not a great baker," she admitted, "but I'm a fast learner." She was more than that. Within a week, she had memorized every recipe and could braid challah with her eyes closed. She sang while she worked, soft oldies from her grandmother's radio. She stayed late to clean without being asked. Customers adored her. One afternoon, as we were kneading dough side by side, she mentioned offhandedly, "My mom used to talk about women like you, strong, gentle. She always said if she hadn't been helped that night, she never would have made it." I paused. "Helped?" Elsie nodded. "Yeah, she was in a car accident years ago. A stranger stayed with her until the ambulance came. Made sure she stayed conscious, even gave her coat to keep her warm. Never told her name. Just left once the sirens arrived." I felt something shift inside me. "What was her name?" I asked. "My mom? Annabelle." The name hit me like a gust of memory. I remembered the night clearly now. 25 years ago, rain-slicked roads. A silver sedan spun into a ditch. I was driving behind it. I had pulled over, run through mud in heels, knelt beside the woman in the wreckage. She had broken ribs, blood on her face, but her eyes stayed open because I kept her talking. I wrapped her in my coat. I never stayed long enough to be thanked. And now, her daughter was standing in my bakery covered in flour, humming a Marvin Gaye song. The world has a strange way of circling back. I never told Elsie. Some stories are better left to fate. But every time she smiled, something inside me softened. People in town began whispering about me, not in a cruel way, but in that curious small-town tone, reserved for mysteries wrapped in kindness. They noticed I never posted photos online, that I always paid in cash, that I closed the shop every Wednesday without fail, no reason given. They started calling me the flower lady, the quiet one, the angel with pie crust hands. I let them guess. I didn't need anyone to know who I had been. All that mattered was who I was now. And perhaps for the first time in my life, that woman wasn't a shadow of someone else. She was fully, quietly, completely her own. It began with a polite knock on the bakery door one Monday afternoon, just as the last customers were finishing their tea. The young man wore a tweed jacket and carried a leather satchel. His smile was easy, but his eyes were sharp. "Hi there," he said. "My name's Lucas Kane. I'm a writer for the Daily Ember. We're doing a series on small-town businesses that survived the pandemic and became local legends. Your shop came up a dozen times." I hesitated. Publicity was never part of my plan, but something in his tone was gentle, not probing. He ordered a coffee, a slice of my plum tart, and asked if he could sit. "Just a few questions," he said. "We can keep it anonymous if you'd like." I agreed, thinking it would be a light human interest piece, a paragraph in a forgotten column. I told him about Second Rise, how I started it for peace of mind, not profit, how the town responded with warmth. I left out the past. I always did. But Lucas was persistent. Over the next week, he returned for more questions. His curiosity was quiet but constant. "Where did you live before here? How did you fund the startup without loans? You mentioned investing. What kind of investing?" I deflected as gently as I could. "Just small trades over time. Luck and patience." He scribbled notes but didn't press. Still, I could feel something shifting behind his eyes. Then one day, he didn't come in at all. Instead, I received a call. "I hope this isn't invasive," Lucas said, his voice different now, measured, formal. But something came up in research. Some of your old investment filings. I traced an entity that used to hold early shares in Trigene, Hemacorp, Mednex. Quiet buys under a pseudonym, all linked to a trust. Arbor Grace. My breath caught. He paused. And then I saw a name, M.E. Ellison. Silence. I went to med school with Ethan Ellison, he said finally. You're his mother, aren't you? I didn't respond. I'm not here to expose you, he added. But this story, it's remarkable. And it's real. If you want to tell it on your terms, I'll let you. But people will find out. Someone else will dig it up eventually. At least let it come from someone who still remembers how Ethan used to brag about your cinnamon rolls. I closed my eyes. That night, I called him back. Write it, I said quietly. Just tell it right. 3 days later, the story dropped. The Hidden Rise. How a small-town baker quietly became a philanthropic powerhouse. It went viral within hours. Lucas was kind in the way he told it. He didn't mention Ethan by name, but he painted the picture fully. A woman widowed young who gave up her career to raise a son, only to vanish years later. A financial strategist who had turned pennies into millions, then walked away from it all. A baker who gave out more bread than she sold. A mother who chose silence over recognition until the past came knocking. By noon, news outlets had picked it up. By sunset, I had 50 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. And somewhere in a sleek condo hundreds of miles away, Ethan read it. He was scrolling through his phone between patients when a nurse tapped him. Hey, isn't this your mom? She held up the screen. The headline glared back at him. He laughed at first. No way, that can't be... But then he saw the photo. Grainy but unmistakable. Me, standing in front of Second Rise, flour on my apron, a quiet smile on my face. His face changed. Excuse me, he muttered, rushing to the staff lounge. He read every word of the article twice, then again. With each paragraph, his expression shifted, from confusion to awe to shame. He saw the list of companies I'd backed, the grants I'd given, the trust I'd built under a false name. He saw the life he never knew I'd built after I vanished. And he realized something else, too. He hadn't even noticed I was gone. His chest tightened. He opened his call log. No recent calls to me. No saved voicemails. No birthday reminders. Just silence, echoing back years of neglect. He called me. I didn't answer. He called again. I let it ring. Then came the text. Mom, please, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I want to see you. Can we talk? I stared at the message, heart thudding. Not from anger, not even from pain. Just the strange ache of being seen again too late. I didn't reply. Not yet. It was a Tuesday morning when they walked in, just as I was setting out fresh scones. The bell above the bakery door jingled as always, and I glanced up, expecting the usual. But instead, I saw Ethan, and beside him, Lily. He looked older than I remembered, tired in the eyes, unsure of his steps. Lily, on the other hand, walked with her usual certainty, her designer coat buttoned perfectly, her heels clicking like punctuation marks against the wooden floor. I didn't flinch. Good morning, I said, as I did to every customer. My voice was steady, my hands still dusted with flour. Table for two? They hesitated. Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Lily smirked slightly, stepping forward. We were just passing through, she said, voice syrupy. Thought we'd support local business. I gave a polite smile, the same one I gave to strangers. Take any seat you like. They sat near the window. I wiped my hands, picked up 2 menus, and walked over. I didn't sit. I didn't lean in close. I simply placed the menus on the table and asked, "What can I get you?" Lily scoffed, almost laughing. That's it? I looked at her. Sorry? No tearful reunion? No dramatic speech? She glanced around. No crowd to witness the prodigal son's return? I met her gaze calmly. We serve breakfast until noon. Lunch starts at 12:30. Ethan looked down, embarrassed, ashamed. Lily raised her eyebrows, clearly disappointed that her imagined confrontation wasn't going the way she'd rehearsed. Wow, cold, even for you. I didn't respond. I simply turned to Ethan. Coffee? He nodded, eyes still lowered. Black, please. I brought their drinks in silence. Lily barely touched hers. After a few awkward minutes, she stood up abruptly, brushing invisible dust from her lap. Well, she said, grabbing her purse, this was, anticlimactic. I thought maybe you'd beg us to stay or at least explain yourself. But I guess pride ages with you. Ethan looked up at her. Lily, she cut him off. You wanted closure? You got it. She clearly doesn't care. Enjoy your scone. With that, she turned on her heel and walked out, heels echoing through the empty bakery. The bell jingled as the door shut behind her. Ethan remained seated. I wiped down the counter. For several long minutes, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the refrigerator and the gentle clink of his spoon stirring sugar he hadn't added. Finally, he cleared his throat. You're really not going to say anything? I looked over. Would you like a lemon tart with that? His shoulders sagged. Mom, please. I blinked slowly. You're welcome to order anything on the menu. He ran a hand through his hair. I deserve that. I didn't answer. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, as if he could close the distance by force. I saw the article. I read it 5 times. I didn't know. I didn't know you. He swallowed hard. Why didn't you tell me? I folded a napkin slowly. You never asked. He winced. I was busy, he said softly. With the clinic, with Lily, I didn't realize how far things had gone. But I never meant to hurt you. I placed the napkin on a tray. You didn't mean not to. He fell silent again. Outside, a few leaves swirled in the autumn wind. Inside, the warmth of the bakery wrapped around us like a wall. I was proud of you, he said finally. Even before I knew all this, I just got caught up. And Lily, she always thought you were judging her. I wasn't, I replied. I was watching. He flinched again. Can we start over? He asked. I met his eyes for the first time. Would you like that tart warmed or chilled? He laughed softly without humor. You're not going to let me off easy, are you? I raised one brow. This is the easy version. He nodded slowly, understanding more in that moment than in all the years that had come before. I walked back to the kitchen and returned with a tart, set it gently in front of him. On the house. He looked down at it, then back at me. Thank you. For the tart? I asked. For the grace. I didn't reply. He took a bite and we sat there, 2 people with decades between them saying nothing more. No dramatic apologies, no sudden embraces, just coffee, a lemon tart, and the kind of silence that speaks volumes. 2 days after the encounter at the bakery, Ethan returned. This time, he didn't walk through the front door. He came early, before sunrise, when the sky was still a bruised blue and the lake shimmered with mist. He wore a hoodie, hands in his pockets, looking more like the boy I remembered than the man who had sat across from me just days before. He didn't knock. He didn't speak. He simply placed a small white box on the doorstep of Second Rise, tied with twine. Inside, a note. When I opened the bakery that morning, I found it. At first, I thought it was a customer's gift. I untied the twine expecting jam or perhaps cookies from a grateful neighbor. Instead, I saw the folded letter, my name written in handwriting I hadn't seen in years. That uneven loop in the M, the slant of the H, it was Ethan's. The box held no pastry, only the letter, tucked gently inside as if he couldn't bear to hand it to me in person. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, the note in my hands. Then I sat by the window, tea cooling beside me, and opened it. Dear Mom, I don't know if I have the right to call you that anymore. I've spent the last 3 days remembering everything you gave me. Every morning you woke up early to pack my lunch. Every book you bought with money we didn't have. Every night you stayed up while I studied. I remember you crying in the laundry room after my first broken bone. I remember you cheering when I got into med school. And I remember forgetting you. I let someone else tell me your worth. I didn't ask questions. I didn't listen. I convinced myself you'd always be there until one day you weren't. And still, I didn't come find you. I didn't wonder where you'd gone. I just moved on. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need you to know. I'm sorry for the silence, for the selfishness, for letting someone else decide how I should love you. If there's any way back, any version of you that can allow me to earn your trust again, I'll take it. I'll wait. I'll do whatever it takes. I just want a chance to be your son again. Love, Ethan. I didn't cry. I folded the letter carefully and carried it to the back of the bakery. I opened the old cast iron oven I used only for slow bakes, warm, gentle heat that took hours to rise. I placed the letter inside, and I burned it. There was no rage, no tears, just quiet resolve. Some bridges don't collapse. They dissolve. Slowly, one step at a time, until you look down and realize there's nothing beneath you but air. That was us. And even if Ethan tried now to rebuild it, the foundation was gone. He had let me vanish without a single question. He had watched me disappear and didn't flinch. That kind of forgetting, you don't come back from that. Weeks passed. Ethan didn't come again, not right away. But I felt his presence in town, heard whispers that someone had seen a man parked by the lake or asking questions at the florist next door. People were kind. They didn't mention it to me directly. They knew I kept to myself. And then, one afternoon in October, he returned. But this time, I didn't know he was watching. I was outside Second Rise, setting up a small folding table. On it, 3 envelopes rested, each one holding a scholarship award letter and a check made out to a student I'd selected from a nearby high school. It was something I did every fall, quietly. No photos, no applause. 3 teenagers arrived, nervous and wide-eyed. One wore shoes a size too small. Another held her younger sibling's hand. I smiled at each of them, handed them their letters, and said what I always did. This doesn't fix everything, but it helps. You matter. Keep going. They thanked me, tears in their eyes. What I didn't know was that across the street, parked behind a row of hedges, Ethan was watching from his car. He had driven by on impulse, unsure if he'd even stop. But when he saw the scene unfold, the quiet grace, the gentle gift, the unwavering generosity, something inside him cracked open. Because in that moment, he saw the truth. He saw the woman who had raised him still giving, still serving, still lifting others up. But not him. He wasn't in the circle anymore. He wasn't the boy who got the note in his lunchbox or the sweater mended overnight. He was the man who had left. And now, he was the man left behind. He lowered his head against the steering wheel, and for the first time in years, he cried. Not loud, dramatic sobs, just quiet, broken weeping, the kind that comes when regret is too large for language. He stayed until the students walked away, until I folded the table, until I turned off the open sign and disappeared inside. He didn't knock. He knew better now. Some doors, once closed, don't open with apologies. They stay closed not out of bitterness, but preservation. Some hearts learn to beat without the ones they once lived for, and while mine still beat for many, it no longer beat for him. The nights grew longer, the lake a mirror of dark skies and drifting leaves. Autumn was giving way to early winter. Business at Second Rise slowed with the season, and I found myself with more quiet hours than usual. That was when I began to write. It wasn't planned. One evening, after closing the bakery, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of mint tea and opened a blank document on my old laptop. My fingers hovered over the keys for several seconds before they moved, slow at first, like testing forgotten waters. But then, the words poured out. I wrote of the girl I once was, Barefoot in a Georgia backyard, dreaming of cities and sentences, I wrote of Gregory, the man who loved me before the world taught him fear. I wrote of Ethan, of course, his baby laughter, his growing silence, and the ache of motherhood that never truly ended. I wrote it all. The good, the broken, the in-between. It wasn't a revenge story. It wasn't a confession. It was a record, a testament to every version of myself I had lived and let go. When I finished, the manuscript was 221 pages. I didn't reread it. I simply titled the file, Final Grace. Then I did something I hadn't done in 30 years. I sent it to a publisher, but not just any publisher. Decades ago, when Ethan was still in middle school, I had secretly submitted a short story to a small literary press called Maple and Finch. Back then, I was juggling 2 jobs and night classes, and the dream of becoming a writer had felt as distant as another galaxy. Their rejection letter had been kind but firm. Your voice is honest but lacks commercial viability. Best of luck in your endeavors. I had kept that letter folded inside my favorite novel for years, until it crumbled. Now I send the manuscript to them again, but this time under a pseudonym. No resume, no bio. Just a note. This is a true story. You may publish it only if you agree to keep the author anonymous. I ask for no advance. Only that you read it. I didn't expect a response. But 3 weeks later, an email arrived. We'd be honored to publish this. Your story is breathtaking, raw, redemptive. Please allow us the privilege. The editor called it a memoir that reads like fiction and swore it would find a place in readers' hearts. They scheduled it for winter release, prime time for reflective works, and assured me the identity clause would be honored to the letter. I gave them one condition. The cover must not show a face, only a lake in winter, still and open. When the book was released, I didn't attend the launch party. I didn't do interviews or book signings, but I watched from afar. Final Grace became an instant bestseller. Book clubs picked it up. Podcasts quoted it. Readers wrote online essays about the unnamed woman who had survived abandonment, grief, and reinvention with quiet power. They argued over whether it was real, whether the sun ever came back, whether forgiveness had been given. Some cried. Some saw their mothers. Some saw themselves. Ethan saw it on a shelf in the hospital gift shop. He was walking out of a consultation when the cover caught his eye. A lake in winter. He picked it up absently, read the back, and froze. He turned to the first page. By the end of the first chapter, his hands were shaking. It was all there. The banana bread stories, the bruised hands from overtime jobs, the wedding, the seat at the staff table, the oven, the ashes, the tart, and the absence. He bought the book. He read it in one sitting. By sunrise, he had called the publisher. "Can I speak with the author?" he asked, voice breaking. "We don't have contact information," the assistant replied. "They only gave us a P.O. box and the manuscript. Why? Do you know them?" He didn't answer. He hung up and wept. Not because he didn't know the truth before, but because now he couldn't pretend not to. He waited until the snow had melted. Winter faded into early spring, and the lake, once frozen and hard as glass, began to breathe again. Ducks returned, the trees whispered with pale green promises, and the bakery reopened with the scent of lemon lavender scones. Ethan had rehearsed it a dozen times, what he'd say, what he'd ask, what he might beg for. But when the morning came, he didn't bring flowers. He brought the book, the same one he'd read under a blanket on the cold floor of his apartment, pages crinkled with tears. The same one that had torn open his memory like a wound and stitched it back together with truth. Tucked inside the book was a photo, faded, worn along the corners. It showed a young woman in a blue sundress standing on a beach, laughing into the wind. Her hair whipped across her face, her arms open wide. Joy caught mid-motion. It was Martha, years ago. He'd found it in a box marked miscellaneous, hidden deep in his closet. On the first page of the book, beneath the printed title, Final Grace, he had written in his own careful hand, "To the woman who taught me what love is, by showing me what it isn't." He didn't call ahead. He just drove. The bakery looked the same. The soft white curtains, the chalkboard menu, the planter box overflowing with rosemary and daisies. The smell of fresh cinnamon hit him before he even opened the door. Inside, it was quiet. Only one table was occupied, an elderly couple sharing a lemon tart. Behind the counter stood Elsie. She recognized him instantly, though her smile didn't falter. "Back again," she said gently. He nodded. "Is she here?" Elsie wiped her hands on a dish towel. "She's in the kitchen." "Can I—" His voice caught. "Can I see her?" She studied him for a long moment. Then slowly she shook her head. "I'm sorry," she said. She asked not to be disturbed. He swallowed hard, the weight of disappointment familiar and sharp. "I brought something," he said, placing the book on the counter, the photo peeking from between the pages. "I thought maybe she'd want to know I remembered." Elsie glanced down. Her eyes softened as she read the inscription. Without a word, she disappeared into the back. Ethan waited. The couple left. A clock ticked, and then Elsie returned. Not with Martha, but with a small paper box tied with a thin ribbon. She handed it to Ethan silently. He opened it. Inside was a loaf of warm honey oat bread, crust dusted with brown sugar, and carved into the top with delicate care were the words, "Love doesn't always come back, but it doesn't die." Ethan stared at it for a long moment, the message sinking deeper than anything he'd read in a lifetime of medical charts and textbooks. His fingers trembled. "She baked this?" he whispered. Elsie nodded once. "Every year, on the first day of spring." Ethan pressed the book to his chest, then the bread. He said nothing. Tears spilled freely, unchecked. They rolled down his face in silence, grief not for what had happened, but for what never would. He turned toward the window, unable to stop himself from looking, just once, hoping, and he saw her. Across the street, near the edge of the lake, she stood beneath a tree just beginning to blossom, a pale scarf tied loosely around her hair, arms folded. She didn't wave, she didn't smile, she simply watched, not with anger, but with the quiet of someone who had let go so completely she no longer needed closure, only distance. He took a step toward the door, but before he could open it, she turned and walked away. Slow, deliberate steps. Toward the lake, toward the golden light spilling across the horizon, toward the silence she had earned. He didn't follow. He stood frozen, one hand still on the doorknob, the other clinging to the bread and the book and everything he had once taken for granted. Outside, the sky turned the color of forgiveness, soft, gold, and out of reach. And somewhere within that fading light, a woman who had been forgotten walked tall into her final chapter, victorious in her stillness.